Thank you for your interest in this movie documenting the life and coaching career of my father, Sherard Shaw. My father was passionate about everything he did, and especially the young men he had the distinct honor to coach. This movie is a tribute to the collective passion of those athletes and the excellence they all pursued both on and off the field of competition. With the help of many of my father's former players, we have established the Sherard Shaw Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research. Just as my father dedicated his life to positively influencing young people, our foundation seeks to build upon that spirit by continuing to help children with cancer. You may learn more by visiting SherardShaw.org.
Friday night football games at Jackson Academy High School in Jackson, Mississippi are some of the most colorful and exciting in the entire Magnolia State. Attractive brick bleachers and administration buildings hug the turf field to create an intimate stage on which the gridiron battles unfold. A Jumbotron blares up-tempo music and projects live high-definition video footage fed to it by a sophisticated network of manned cameras and drones. This second-to-none infrastructure is populated by an army of passionate students and parents and is brought to life by an unmatched triumvirate of band, dance, and cheerleading squads. And of course, at the center of this mega production of high school sports stands a championship-caliber football team. The presence of so many sensory distractions makes it understandable if one of the venue's most symbolic and meaningful elements is overlooked. Nestled in the southwest corner of the end zone stands a bronze statue of the school's mascot, a raider, sword drawn on the back of a rearing horse. But this statue is far more than a simple display of a mascot. Rather, it is the embodiment of the school's soul. A reminder of the institution's infancy and early evolution before there were championships, or even seniors. A tribute to a man whose passion for the school pushed it beyond what others could see and towards what only he could dream. This is the story of Coach Sherard Shaw. Sherard Shaw Sr. grew up in Macomb, Mississippi, and was a star quarterback for the Macomb Tigers football team. His abilities earned him an athletic scholarship to the University of Southern Mississippi, where he met his future wife, a talented musician and arts major by the name of Nanette Walker. Shortly after graduation, the couple relocated to Clarksdale, where Sherard Sr. took a job as a coach and administrator in the public school system. In 1952, the couple welcomed their first child, Sherard Shaw Jr., into the family, and then added younger brother Eric in 1956. A third son, Joseph Lee, was born 4 years later, but passed away only a few days after birth. The Shaws were a tight-knit Christian family that lived by traditional values and cherished the world and family around them.
My dad knew where every wild plum tree was in the state. If he was going from Clarksdale to Grenada, he knew that about 6 miles outside of Grenada, there were some plum trees along the edge of the woods there on the side of the road. And we would get to them, and Dad would start saying, okay, the plum trees are going to be right up here on the left, I think. And when we would get there, we'd all get our hats out, we'd go fill them full of plums, back to the car, and off we'd go. We always sang in our home. On vacations, there were 4 of us. We learned 4-part harmony, and everybody had their part.
His daddy was a nice guy. His mother was a great person. Eric was better than all of them put together.
Sherard had a magic about him. He was magnetic. He would draw people into him, and they liked what they found once they were in his presence. I mean, Sherard was a very, very special person.
Sports was an important part of the Shaw household, and Sherard Jr.'s competitive streak was revealed at an early age.
We had some vacant lots not far from the house, so we started playing ball at early ages, and Sherard, that's when he really let everyone know that he was a fierce competitor.
He just, like I said, we grew up with sports. That's all we did. We didn't hunt and fish.
And we played, and we didn't play to play. We played to win.
It was great growing up in Clarksdale.
As the boys got older, life increasingly centered around the high school, where the elder Shaw was also serving as principal.
I don't believe you could have had a better school to go to than Oklahoma County High School.
Mr. Shaw was a great man as well. He could really hit you hard with that paddle.
He paddled me many times.
Now, what I remember about Mr. Shaw was he didn't miss anything, any game that we had. He was always there.
Sherard Jr. excelled in multiple sports and followed in his father's footsteps by playing quarterback.
He was limited because he was small, but he was very serious about it.
And he was a coach on the field. He was a real leader. I mean, even though he was small, but he was a scrappy little guy.
And when he came into the huddle, there was no talking. You listened to what he had to say.
He was pretty good at reading the defense, even back then, before reading defense was probably very popular. He knew what was going on in the game before it happened. Just a smart guy, a smart quarterback.
As intense a competitor as Sherard Jr. was, there was a flip side to his personality that kept him in balance.
Well, Sherard was a jokester. Don't ever turn your back on him. He'll make you regret that.
He was one of the most likable guys at the school.
Sherard would tell a joke. If he had a joke, he would tell it.
In fact, Sherard Jr. was so committed to telling jokes, he would persist even after being issued a cease and desist order by Sherard Sr. at the family dinner table.
Sherard didn't cut it out. He continued to make whatever the remark was, and it got funnier and funnier.
Sherard's persistence led to the predictable discharge of milk from his younger brother's nose, and dear old Dad was caught directly in the line of fire.
He was polka-dotted with a red face and a lot of milk, and all I can remember is hearing Sherard's chair hit the floor and him running out of the room because he knew that he was about to get the wrath of Dad.
The elder Shaw continued to be on the receiving end of Sherard Jr.'s sense of humor, even into his high school years, particularly on a night he was driving behind the baseball team bus.
I don't know, Sherard just all of a sudden he said, it's my dad back there. I'm fixing to moon him. I said, man, you're not going to do that. So, yeah. So he dropped him down. He put it right up against the back glass. So then 2 or 3 of us did, so he wouldn't be the only one getting in trouble.
After graduating high school, Sherard spent 1 semester at Ole Miss before transferring to Mississippi Delta Junior College in Moorhead. There, he briefly tried his hand at football before settling into a role as the school's sports writer. 2 years later, he continued his education at Delta State in Cleveland, Mississippi, where he reconnected with one of his high school wide receivers and would acquire a nickname that would follow him the rest of his life.
And he said, well, I need a nickname because it's hard for me to relate the name Sherard to people that you meet for the first time. Clint Eastwood wore this flat-brimmed cowboy-style hat. It was a leather hat. And Sherard had one that he used to wear when we would go to a game or we would go out somewhere to eat or get pizza, and he would wear this leather hat. Somebody mentioned the fact that that hat looked like a hat you would wear to go boogie. And so I told him that that's what we'll call him, Boogie. And he thought about it, and he said, that sounds good. Well, it wasn't very long that all of our friends were calling him Boogie. With
a stylish new nickname in place, Boogie Shaw decided to adopt a stylish new haircut as well.
He and I both wore a shag haircut. I don't know, shag today is more like a mullet, but his hair was long in college.
Still a fierce competitor and passionate about sports, Boogie Shaw and his shag haircut joined the Intramural League at Delta State.
Just playing a touch flag football game, he had his sweatbands on just right, his socks were pulled up just right, He had on a coordinated color shirt and pants, and when he hit the field, he was ready to go. And he thought if you looked good, you played good. I do remember when we lost a game that it was like you may have lost the Super Bowl. He didn't go to the cafeteria and eat. He sat around in the room with the light off and got in the bed, and he was so distraught over the fact that we lost an intramural game, and I've never been that serious about it, but he was serious.
No, I expected that guy to have success. This is the way he carried himself. He never got in trouble. Always there, put a hand out to help anybody out that needed help. But he hustled, he studied. I expected him to do well. Yeah, I knew he'd be a coach one day.
Upon graduating from Delta State, Shaw began his coaching career at a middle school in Natchez, Mississippi. After only a year, he then accepted a job at Greenwood Pillow Academy under Sammy D'Antone, a man that would become a lifetime friend and mentor. D'Antone's knowledge of Shaw stemmed from an event several years prior, when D'Antone brought his Greenwood High team to Clarksdale to play a football game against Coahoma County High School.
Well, the weather was bad, and it was a threat of snow, and it started snowing, and we sitting there scratching our end trying to figure out what we're going to do about getting back to Greenwood. So I called our superintendent, W.B. Dribbin, and said, we're going to spend the night up here. And Coach Shaw's daddy put us up with some of the players' families there in Clarksdale that night, and that's when I met Sherard. So I knew him, and I knew what he's made out of, so we offered him a job.
The opportunity was excellent for Shaw, as Pillow had a well-established athletic program, and D'Antone had already assembled an all-star coaching staff that included basketball legend Charlie Wright and track wizard John McGinnis.
It was a fun place. I had a great time at Pillow Academy. We were very competitive in just about every sport.
Well, I knew Sherard loved that baseball, so we immediately made him head baseball coach and junior high football coach.
No, he was real energetic. He had a good relationship with the players.
Easy to communicate with. He's always looking for new ideas. He was smart as a whip.
My buddies would say, God, how old is he? Did he just finish high school or something? He would get out there and a lot of times run the bases, compete against us. He wanted to beat your brains out.
Always the showman, Shaw fit perfectly into D'Antone's staff and the reputation that often preceded it.
You better be ready to play when you play these teams. These teams are always going to be very physical.
Mac and D'Antone was crazy.
From what I understand, if things weren't going real well in practice, supposedly he had a red bandana or handkerchief in his pocket, and when he threw it on the ground, it was kind of, it was a free-for-all. You better protect yourself. Pretty much anything was legal. So I don't know how much of that's true, how much of that's rumor. A lot of it's probably been embellished over the years, or maybe not.
D'Antone's unorthodox motivational techniques would become more a part of Shaw's coaching DNA with each passing season. The two men also shared a passion for looking good, especially when it came to uniforms and facilities.
At Pillow, it used to be, the uniform used to be like the Green Bay Packers.
Sammy was a huge Notre Dame fan.
So supposedly D'Antone made a call to somebody up at Notre Dame.
Found out what the mixture was on painting the helmets every week, and they got the mixture and the gold dust and all from Notre Dame.
Now that was a pretty funny thing to see. D'Antone, Mac, and Coach Perkins in there spraying helmets Thursday night. They got a little crazy some of those nights.
And we do that every week.
As the head coach of the varsity baseball team, Shaw adapted and applied many of D'Antone's football rituals to the diamond.
He was a Sammy D'Antone disciple. I mean, he was it's almost as if they were joined by the hip.
One of the things he wanted to have a beautiful field. At the time, we didn't have a batting cage. We didn't have a net. So we go out to a pecan orchard. We're shaking trees, baskets and baskets. We raised enough money, we got the nets. That was his show. He wanted his show to look good, whether it was football or basketball or whatever. He wanted it to look good.
He was almost like a Pied Piper. People they gravitated toward Sherard.
Eventually capturing Pillow Academy's first baseball state championship, Shaw's unique abilities as a coach were apparent even to the principal at rival Indianola Academy.
Had great admiration for him because we knew when we encountered a Sherard Shaw team, they were going to be well prepared, but always recognizing that on life's journey, if you ever had the opportunity to work with them, you would want to make that possible.
In 1979, Dan Tone jumped at an opportunity to become headmaster and football coach at Brandon Academy, and he took his top lieutenants, McInnes and Shaw, with him.
Brandon Academy was probably one of your top football programs in the state. I mean, year in and year out, they signed multiple, scholarships and a lot of them to SEC schools.
But Sherard Mack moved on down here, and he started working on the field, started helping out with the school, cleaning it up. We had to do it all, and that was the dirtiest place I've ever been in my life.
We slept on a cot and a couch up there for about 3 or 4 weeks. You name it, we worked on it.
And they're sweeping, they're cleaning, they're mopping, they're painting. I mean, the coaches.
We were young and energetic, it really didn't bother us that much.
We may not beat everybody, but we're going to look the best. And they brought a sense of pride in, and I think that translated over to all their players.
Just as he had at Pillow Academy, Shaw immediately developed a rapport with the students and athletes at his new school.
Wrestling was real big at Brandon when I was growing up. It was every Wednesday night at the Coliseum. So a big group of us guys would always go. Shaw and Sherard got, this big idea, we're gonna get ready for, Dusty Road. So they pulled us out of class that Wednesday and went to the cheerleaders' closet and got the cheerleader paper and markers, and we made all these, Welcome to Jackson, Dusty Road, American Dream signs. And
every time we went to wrestling, we had signs made.
They took us all. They took the whole team to the Coliseum, and they got fired up. They were leading the team, like they were leading the chants, and the whole team is with them. We're 7th, 8th graders. We don't know the difference. But Shaw and Sherard and they were masters at getting their players involved with them and the attitude that you develop from them. So it was pretty funny.
Possibly inspired by the theatrics of professional wrestling, it was at Brandon Academy that Shaw began his infamous tradition of showing up dressed as General Patton.
I'm not real sure where Shaw got the idea of dressing up like Patton. He probably got it from Dantone, because before our games, Dantone would have us listen to all these real tough military or football guy coaches, and one of those was the Patton speech.
And so the players knew it. They knew the speech. And then when Coach would come in and give it, it was really a motivational thing.
He'd come out, in the full green uniform and this, Army hat and boots. And
yeah, I knew he was going to do it, but I didn't know what all he was going to do, but it was really good.
Oh, he'd bring the house down, He was a very good actor and very animated, and he could play the part well.
Due to its location, Brandon Academy regularly competed against powerhouse Jackson Prep in most sports. It was during this time that Shaw developed an obsession with beating the larger school. He relished the underdog role and used it to play to his players' emotions, especially in one particular basketball game.
We played prep at Brandon, and he comes up with this big theatrical, we're going to have redneck night. Because he thought to beat prep, we got to out-redneck them.
All those preppies, they look down on you Rankin County rednecks, and we're going to just show them. We're going to embrace our redneckedness, or something like that. We want to pack the house. I want everybody to dress up in their best hayseed or country outfits, overalls.
As chance would have it, team photos were scheduled for that day, and the photographer pled with Shaw to remove his redneck attire for the official shot.
He said, no, today I'm a redneck and we're beating the preppies tonight. Our point guard, Ricky Favor, hit a shot at the top of the key at the buzzer to win the game. I mean, the place just went crazy.
After a successful but tumultuous 3-year stint at Brandon Academy, Dantone began to search for his next coaching challenge. Heritage Academy in Columbus quickly emerged as the most likely destination, until a surprising new option entered the discussion.
Sherard and I had decided, we were going to go with him. And we had already actually looked into renting a house in Columbus. And Coach Dantone called us in one day, and he says we're going to Jackson Academy. I'd heard of Jackson Academy. They'd only played football for maybe a couple of years. Didn't know a lot about them. And I remember Sherard, he looks at Coach Dantone, and first question was, what's our mascot? And he said Raiders. The next question was, what's our colors? Coach Dantone said, well, we're blue and silver. And Shaw kind of cut his eyes and said Dallas Cowboys.
At that point in time, the term high school had only been associated with Jackson Academy for a scant 24 months. During the first 20 years of its existence, the school had largely served as a feeder to Jackson Prep High School. However, in the fall of 1980, and mere months after suffering through the devastating flood of 1979, Jackson Academy added grades 10, 11, and 12 and began competing in varsity athletics in the single A classification. Headmaster Glenn Kane tapped Coach Ron Journey to lead the first Raider football team, a collection of only 16 players consisting of 0 seniors.
So we knew it was going to be a little bit of a challenge that first year, but when you only have 16 players, it can be kind of difficult at times.
Making the climb even more steep was a natural animosity for many of the small-town opponents.
And these single-A schools, their perspective is these city guys, they've got it all. What are they doing playing single-A ball? That's not fair to us.
I don't think any of us had really heard of Porter's Chapel. It's outside of Vicksburg, and they were not happy about a big Jackson school being in their division.
And no one really knows who started it, but a riot broke out. There were law enforcement officers involved. There was high patrol involved. They had to escort us out of the stadium and out of the school and off the grounds and the town, for that matter, for the purposes of safety.
So I think our first year we went 4-5. But the good thing about it was that we had everybody back the next year.
Armed with its first group of seniors, Jackson Academy's young football program experienced marked improvement in season number 2.
And we had a really good team and went 10-0 during the regular season. And we weren't appreciated for coming in and winning all the games.
And what was possibly a move to appease the small-town members of the single A classification, the school's association jumped Jackson Academy straight to AAA just prior to the 1982 season.
That was pretty shocking to everybody. But we felt like we'd had a good nucleus of players coming back.
It was a big step up from single A to playing the big boys.
It's time, really honestly, for this program to ascend to another level, whether we thought we were ready or not.
Interestingly, Coach Ron Journey would not be present when the Raiders tackled the more competitive league. In a twist of events, he opted to move into the coaching vacancy at Brandon Academy, created by D'Antone's departure. Seen as a more established football program, Journey took advantage of the opportunity to launch his future career as a head coach at the collegiate level.
At that time, their facilities were further advanced than JA, but there was no question JA was going to eventually probably surpass that.
It was a unique situation where Ron Journey went to Brandon and Sammy D'Antone came to Jackson Academy.
He felt like we had some pretty good studs left over at Brandon Academy.
He's never thanked me for, him being able to inherit that program when it was going into AAA.
Associated with the coaching carousel were a few key recruiting battles that would shape the local football landscape over the next decade. First, Jackson Prep was able to lure longtime D'Antone assistant John McInnes away with its top flight track program. Second, D'Antone was able to convince young bucks Shaw and Shepard to follow him to Jackson Academy. And third, Shaw was able to grab a nucleus of talent from Brandon Academy on the way out the door.
They didn't think that we would bring those players over to Jay and everything was going to be all right. Well, it wasn't all right.
I was like, I'm in. Where are we going? Let's go.
There was a good bond with these coaches. And
Sherard was the big push behind getting those kids to come.
We're going to Jackson Academy. Where's that? Because it wasn't even hardly a school, I don't think.
And, I remember Chris Launch's house in particular. We go over there one day and we're visiting with his dad, Butch, and, they're cutting hay. And, they were farmers. And, Shaw he just climbs up on the tractor and starts driving the tractor, cutting the hay. And he was do anything, to get, to build relationship, to build trust, to get people over there.
Shaw's recruiting coup injected immediate talent into Jackson Academy's athletic program, but it also created an air of uncertainty amongst the recruits and the JA natives.
There was a lot of things to think about and try to figure out at first.
I guess scary at first for us to go over to JA, but of course, from a personal and a business perspective, it was probably the best move we ever made.
We obviously knew there was a whole bunch of coaches coming in. They were bringing a whole bunch of players with them. We're thinking about, all right, is my spot still going to be available?
We had a pickup game of basketball, And I remember them walking out on the court, and I was like, my gosh, where did they get these guys from, and what are they feeding them? They're huge.
They were full-grown men. I mean, half of them had full beards.
And we knew at that point we had something special. And more importantly, that we had to work to get it and to earn that spot.
Everybody was awesome. The parents, the players, I mean, everybody just gelled. It was like we'd all been together forever.
Just as they had at Pillow and Brandon Academies, D'Antoni and Shaw quickly went to work injecting their trademark swagger into the young Raider football program.
Oh, wow. I mean, where do I begin?
It was passion, and it was just Coach D'Antoni.
He had those aviator glasses, those Ray-Bans, and you couldn't ever see his eyes and where he was looking.
He had passion in everything that he did, and especially his football.
All the way down to, the football field itself.
We've got to fertilize it, we've got to water it, we want it to have the greenest look.
The pride that he took in the developing of the helmets, the colors.
At Pillow and Brandon Academy, we dressed just about alike because we had the Notre Dame colors. When I went to J.A., Mr. Kane said, we're not going to have any Notre Dame colors over here.
He went to present in an amazing way, sort of marketing 101 for football.
Coach Shaw advised me, said, Coach, what we ought to do is we ought to look just like the Cowboys. So that's what we did. We put the stripe on the helmet, put the J.A. on the side, silver pants with the stripe down the side.
Behind that great presentation and the look of that team, which was slick and cool, was a man who knew exactly what he was doing when it came to football strategy and execution on the field.
He was a player's coach. Like, you always wanted to play for him. You always wanted to go the extra mile for him.
D'Antoni focused on the incremental improvement of the varsity team as it wrestled with a competitive AAA schedule. Shaw, however, demanded immediate success from his junior high squad, which featured many of the talented Brandon Academy transfers, as well as a powerful young crop of JA natives. The extent to which Shaw wanted to win was clearly displayed in a junior high game against his former employer, Pillow Academy.
Walked in and we saw 6 numbers, up on the board. Like, what is this? And he walked in, he said, you see these 6 numbers? I want these guys taken out of the game. And it happened, unfortunately.
Over the course of the 1982 and 83 seasons, Shaw's junior high Raiders were undefeated and unscored upon until the final game in 83, when the second team unit surrendered a late score.
We got in the locker room and it was like we had lost every game. People were crying and just upset, and people were throwing things and mad because, especially us ninth graders, we had gone 2 years 16-0 and nobody had ever scored on us.
While Shaw and his teams were unconquerable and laser focused on the field, Shaw found himself personally distracted off the field by a 26-year-old second-grade teacher named Tina Edwards.
He really would hang out around the second-grade classrooms and run into Tina on purpose.
My girlfriends and I, at the time, were looking out the window when he came to pick me up because he drove a Smokey and the Bandit car.
Yeah, I remember vividly the black Trans Am, and he did think he was Burt Reynolds.
He made that car look cool. Not vice versa.
He was 6 years older, so we called him the old man. Not only that, but he had 2 children already. So I was like, this is just going to be a hoot, but I'm going to do it.
Tina was the cute, pretty teacher there, and when he introduced me to her, he was very proud of Tina.
They were you just thought, this is special. They really connected, and they were a beautiful couple together. It was special for all of us. We could feel it.
If you don't think about love at first sight, it wasn't first sight, but after the first day, we knew, both of us, it was just meant to be.
By March of 1984, the couple was engaged, and they married just before the start of the upcoming football season. The school's 5th varsity football team was loaded with talent, and D'Antoni moved Shaw up from the junior high to take full advantage of the opportunity. Reunited with his Brandon Academy recruits and the rest of his undefeated junior high squads, Shaw helped D'Antoni pull out all the stops for what many expected to be Jackson Academy's first championship run. And in true D'Antoni and Shaw fashion, their first move was to get in their players' heads by loading up the entire football program and leaving campus.
If there was ever an opportunity to bring a group of players together, it was Holmes County State Park.
At first we were like, we're going to camp, like a boot camp, like military?
They went and got the weights out of the weight room, loaded them into the U-Haul. Those went with us.
We didn't really know what to expect.
It was dreaded, and you couldn't wait for it to be over with. And you walk in this gigantic room, nothing but, bunk beds everywhere.
I mean, they woke us up every morning early. We had breakfast. We practiced in the mornings. We would come back. We would lift weights. We'd watch film. We would practice, in shorts right after lunch. And then the brutal one was the afternoon. We'd come in the afternoon full pads, and it was Oklahoma. It was doing bear crawls. There were, people throwing up, people crying, people doing everything. I mean, it was brutal.
And then every night you had to watch Patton. D'Antoni had the Patton movie there. You had to watch Patton. And you didn't leave. You watched Patton, no matter how tired you were.
But we were there for a purpose, and it was to get better as a football team and to get closer as a football team.
I can remember the players coming back and listen to him talk about what just basically hell they put the players through during that time.
Once you got back home from Holmes County State Park, the synergy, amongst the team was phenomenal.
A key member of the 1984 team ended up being the manager, an 11th grader by the name of Tony Shell. An ace pitcher on the baseball team, Shell had long committed himself to a future on the diamond and opted not to compete in football. However, just prior to the '84 season, Shaw and D'Antoni convinced Shell to contribute to the team as a punter. Soon after, the coaches found themselves without a backup quarterback and once again approached Shell.
Coach D'Antoni and Coach Shaw, they came to me and said, hey, I know you're our punter, but we need you just to learn the plays at quarterback in case something happens to Chris.
In the second game of the season against crosstown rival MRA, starting quarterback Chris Lawrence, a Shaw recruit from Brandon Academy, injured his arm and had to be replaced by Shell. The Raiders lost the game, but it marked a turning point in the season. The talented Lawrence was moved to tailback and Shell remained under center. Recognizing the great talent that had fallen into his lap, including Shell's cannon for an arm, Sherard Shaw began dialing up new creative schemes for the Raider offense.
He was offensive. He didn't care anything about defense.
It seemed like we did a lot of things that nobody else did.
We were the first high school team really to get into shotgun.
He had them ready to go in the spread. We ran a spread offense, double slot.
I recall being on the sidelines as the ball boy, watching Tony throw to David Clayton, David D'Antoni. You just couldn't believe that he virtually came from nowhere.
J.A. rode Shell's arm and Shaw's high-powered offense all the way to the North AAA championship. The school's inclusion in the north half of the conference was geographically odd and rooted in an agreement between the administrations of Jackson Academy and Jackson Prep, made 2 years prior.
J.A. was put in the north, which made for some really long trips to the Delta.
Because we had the rule then that we couldn't play prep.
Being right here in the same city, they did not want J and Prep playing each other.
At that time, there were still families that had elementary kids at JA, high school kids at Prep. They would wait till they got to junior high and transfer them over to Prep.
In fact, the only way JA and Prep would ever meet would be if both schools made it to the playoffs. After winning in the North AAA and then avenging their early season loss to MRA in the first round of the playoffs, the stage was set for the first ever meeting between the two schools on the gridiron. A meeting that would give birth to one of the greatest football rivalries in the entire state of Mississippi.
It was a huge deal to be playing them.
I think Coach D'Antoni and Shaw and them probably had always built it up like that. Big JP, Big Jackson Prep.
Prep had asked us maybe to move the game, over to Prep so we could get more, and of course we wouldn't do that.
The excitement that built around that first ever matchup was, it was incredible. I can remember we played the Friday after Thanksgiving.
So we were playing, at JA, and I remember when we came back from pregame meal at about 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. There's already people in the stand.
You look up and you're like, holy cow. I've never played in front of this many people in my entire life.
J.A. received the opening kickoff, and D'Antoni decided to set the tone of the game, if not the entire rivalry, by instructing resident headhunter Keith Parker to take dead aim at the Prep kicker.
We had him sitting right up on the middle, and when the guy came down, we wanted him to put him on the ground.
That was my job. I did it. D'Antoni expected it, and that's what I did. When the kicker starts running, that's when I started running. When I got to the kicker, his head was still looking down at the tee. So there you have it.
The refs immediately flagged Parker for unnecessary roughness, which negated a Stacy Phillips return that had penetrated deep into prep territory. But nonetheless, Shaw's offense, led by Tony Shell, quickly began executing their own special game plan.
We spread them out because Prep had a habit of blitzing Tony Shell back at quarterback. So when them suckers blitzed, both those backs just went around them and left them open. That was Sherard's idea.
This was all special for that game, trying to do whatever we needed to do to win that game.
And we did take the opening drive, then from there and drive it down, and we scored and went ahead 6-0.
But anyway, it was a battle all night.
And we ended up losing the game 21-6, but I think they knew that Jay was not only here, but here to stay.
Although the football team fell just short of a state championship in 1984, Shaw's baseball team captured the school's first title in the spring of that same school year. The title was particularly miraculous, considering that Shaw was the school's first ever baseball coach, and he and his players had literally built the baseball field themselves only 24 months prior. With the bulk of the talent returning the following season, expectations were once again sky high for the football and baseball teams, until Shaw informed his players of an unexpected decision.
Yeah, we won the baseball state championship, and then he came to us right after that and said that he's got bad news or good news, whatever you want to look at it, that he's going to go into the insurance business and he's not going to be coaching again. And of course, we're all like,
You know, it was just hard making a living on 2 teachers and coaching salary.
Well, he just felt like he needed to make more money for his family and so forth.
His heart was always there at JA, in coaching, and and the kids. That's what he was all about, is making champions. Him and D'Antone both. That's what they did.
As much as Shaw loved his players, he loved his own children even more. He first became a father while coaching at Pillow Academy. He and his first wife, Joni, welcomed Sherard Rudolph Shaw III, a.k.a. Bubba, into the world in 1974, and daughter Meredith in 1978.
Of course, Bubba came out as a mini-me. I mean, he was just, you could look at Bubba and see a little Sherard.
He's too young for that. He can't do that yet. I mean, it was like in a crib, and he's like wanting to do something with this child.
Sherard taught Bubba everything to know about sports when they brought him home from the hospital.
I'd be afraid you're going to break his neck. But, you know, it didn't stop him. He loved being outside with Bubba and just interacting with him.
The Shaws have always been a family of boys.
We didn't even think about a girl because the Shaws did not have girls.
And then all of a sudden we had a little girl to come into the family.
It's a girl. No, it's not a girl. He said, no, really, it's a girl.
That thrilled my mother. Sherard, as anxious as he was to teach Bubba everything to do athletically, he was in the same breath very protective of that little girl.
Sherard's marriage to Tina produced daughters Blair in 1987 and Heather in 1990. Looking behind the curtain into his home life reveals a tender side to the fiery coach.
You know, it's almost hard for me to hear stories where he's serious on the football field because the dad we knew was so gentle and so he was our protector and our caretaker, and you knew that, but he was never harsh.
I cannot remember a time where he actually got on to us. We were the princesses.
When they would get in trouble, they would go sit on the side right here and kind of hide their heads behind.
Mom would come in there and get on to us, and we'd run as fast as we could and jump in the chair with Dad like, wasn't me. And he'd be like, it's fine. And they would say, Mom would come and say, Sherard, you're not helping me when you baby them when they're in trouble.
The blue chair, it was also the football watching chair. That's where he watched film, where he watched games, but it was also where if you could get away from Mom, even if you were in trouble, if you could get to the chair, then you weren't going to have to go to your room.
He was great. I mean, he was great with babies. He knew more than I knew because, well, he had been through it for one thing, but he just was very natural. One of my favorite memories is of him in our house. You either got to do the dishes for dinner, clean up, or you got to give the girls a bath. He would give them a bath, and then he would get them one by one on the floor, and he would sit with them, and he would blow dry their hair. And it was just so neat to see. It was just such a connection.
Shaw's ability to cater to the needs of the little girls supplemented rather than displaced his passion for athletic competition, and he happily shared that passion with his children.
Yeah, he liked to play the sports with them when he could. Blair could throw a football as good as any boy. Still kind of can.
I think it's the reason I can't fix anything around the house is like I didn't grow up doing any of that kind of stuff because I was always doing something sports related.
I definitely loved sports growing up. I was not a girly girl. I played every sport I could. I don't know that I was the greatest athlete, but I definitely got my heart and my competitive spirit from him.
Even in teaching Bubba how to play ping pong, he was going to win. He never let him win. He always made him work for everything he got.
We had a makeshift ping pong table that was a piece of plywood on 2 sawhorses. We'd play best 2 out of 3, and he always won. And then eventually I started to win a little bit, and then it got to the point where I would win every time, and then we just quit playing.
Even as he lived in the moment, Shaw also kept an eye on the future, as evidenced by one of his favorite hobbies.
His thing way back then was taking videos.
Big old video camera. It was giant. I remember, I think it actually could sit on his shoulder. You know, just the old tapes, but it was, as Mom says, it was attached to his hip at all times.
You know, Mom said he just wanted to document every single memory.
Whatever event it was, he'd tell the day and the time and how old you were, and he'd make you say it. He'd go person to person, so that was always our joke.
You know, he loved to document Heather most because she was always the silly one.
He's trying to catch us doing the wrong thing, like where it might be in the corner picking her nose or something, you know.
Bubba was always flexing. He would say, "Dad, look over here. You see this right here?" And it looked about like this right here.
It's fairly well known that I wasn't terribly camera shy.
There's actually a video of Blair pushing me down the slide and Bubba laughing and Dad's laughing in the background and Mom's obviously freaking out.
But that was who he was. He loved to laugh, he loved to have fun, and the more it made him laugh, the more he was gonna go with it.
As high a priority as Shaw put on his time with his children, there was one event each week that elevated to co-equal status.
First of all, he went and bought this TV that was humongous. Took like 3 men to move it into our house. And he would turn it up to the very tip top when they started playing. Are you ready for some football? And then the Monday night football song would come on and the walls would be bouncing. And it was a certain time. You knew it was going to happen every Monday night. And he had this blue chair he would sit in and he'd draw out the plays. In the meantime, we'd just be working around him. You know, the girls would be playing down on the floor. You could see him many times. He'd be down on the floor playing with them, but he was still looking at that football game.
During these years, Shaw remained connected to Jackson Academy football. In fact, Coach Sammy D'Antone continued to rely on Shaw as a play caller from the press box, even though he was not formally on staff. At the same time, his longtime friend, Coach John McInnes, was quickly climbing the coaching ladder at Jackson Prep, and the 2 men routinely engaged in a Saturday morning phone ritual.
And it would ring, and it would be Coach Mike calling us, and they would sit and they would go over play-by-play all of the games. They had a great relationship, just a wonderful friendship, and they would talk and talk and talk.
You know, we had a paper route that we ran together every morning. So he would wake me up at 4:30 in the morning. I would sit in the back and roll the papers and drop them up front, and then he would throw them. And then once we were done with the paper route, we would go to Jackson Academy and shoot basketball before school started. There's tons of great memories that came from that, whether it was stopping at Shipley's Donuts at 5:45 right when it was open, or just that hour and a half that we had together every single morning for 4 years, not realizing that, you know, at the age of 21 that, you know, he would be gone.
After 7 successful years of selling insurance, Shaw's desire to coach became too intense for him to ignore.
He just came to me one day. We were grilling out. We always solved our problems on the patio grilling out. And he said, my heart's just not in this anymore. I really want to go back to coaching. And I said, okay, well, you should do what you want to do. It's fine with me. I'll pick up any of the jobs that I need to. I can tutor. We can do whatever. It was definitely what he needed to do. I saw a complete difference in the person he was. He didn't look at being the football coach as only being the football coach. He looked at it as being, I'm going to help make and mold these guys' lives, and I want them to do the right thing, and I want them to be great people.
As fate would have it, a longtime admirer of Shaw's coaching abilities had recently become the headmaster at Jackson Academy, and he was in the market for a junior high football coach.
We had been courting Sherard Shaw to return to Jackson Academy.
He just was a man for the job if we could hire him.
I had not missed a day at Jackson Academy, had an appointment with Sherard, but came down with a serious sinus infection and could not go to school. So I encouraged Sherard to come to my house.
He loved Mr. Turnberg very much. He called him Dr. J. And he talked to him in his pajamas.
And we negotiate the contract and solidify his return to Jackson Academy. So it was a great day's work, even though absent from campus.
Shaw's return to coaching would mark the first time he was not preparing his junior high players to advance to a varsity team led by Sammy D'Antone. Shaw would also find the Jackson Academy junior high program in a drastically different condition than the undefeated, unscored-upon machine he had constructed years prior.
My 8th grade year, we were very, very bad. We won one game.
And pretty much got destroyed in the 7 losses. I'm not sure any of them were close.
We probably didn't have enough emphasis on junior high athletics. Our facilities were subpar. We didn't think our coaches were necessarily getting everything out of our kids that they could.
Many of the 9th graders on Shaw's first team were not even students at Jackson Academy during his first tenure at the school. And knowledge of their new coach ranged from non-existent to mythical.
I knew zero about him. We had never met him before, insurance guy that was going to be our new coach.
You know, and it was almost like this myth kind of, because people started talking about him and they were saying, you know, Coach Shaw's coming back. Oh, he was at JA, you know, a long time ago.
Knew of him through the Delta and Brandon Academy and knew his history.
He had left and he was this great coach. And, you know, he was coming back to revive the Raider program.
Came in, he's like, introduced himself, and from there, it was kind of like, you kind of had this uneasy feeling.
He came in the locker room to a guys that essentially had lost almost every game they played. Throw everything away. We're going to do it my way. It's my way or the highway. But if you buy in, you won't lose.
For a lot of the guys, that was their first time to ever meet him. And you knew then it was going to be a new day. You knew then that 1-7 was not acceptable.
And coming from the coaches that we had, he was a lot different. So we knew we had something a little bit special.
Utilizing the same formula he had implemented on numerous occasions before, Shaw reshaped the attitude of the team with his own unique blend of personality, style, and hyper attention to detail.
What I remember was the Raider den getting cleaned up immediately, repainted, the football field, you know, he'd get on his little mower and mow the football field.
Established a weight program right off the bat.
And I'm not sure any of us could hardly walk after that first session. And it was really kind of a weeding out process. I mean, we're 13 years old and he's already trying to weed out some folks.
He was really tough on his players, expected things from his players.
From the get-go, you know, he was one of those guys who, if he saw potential and he pushed him.
He could get the most out of kids. He would fuss at them, he would correct them, but they would run through a brick wall for him.
Shaw also wasted no time installing a new offense, and he eagerly embraced some of the new trends that had developed in his time away from coaching.
And the offense was very quarterback friendly.
He was trying to mimic and copy the University of Florida's playbook.
A lot of, 2 and 3, 3 wide outs, a lot of slot stuff, a lot of using the back out of the backfield stuff, reverse passes.
He handed us a book and expected us to get it right.
We're kind of like, how are we going to learn all this stuff?
was a very advanced, complicated offense for a bunch of ninth graders.
In addition to a complicated new offensive scheme, Shaw introduced his junior high players to film review and scouting reports.
And he said, you can't change the fact that you have our current players, but we can change the fact that we're going to know our plays, we're going to study film.
When we come in the locker room on a Monday, get presented a package with our names on it, personalized with the JA logos and artwork and handwritten notes.
Film wasn't broken down one or two times. The film was broke down countless times.
Percentage of times they ran off the right tackle, the left tackle.
Looking back, I don't know that we understood what it was until after the fact, but that's kind of, high school level stuff that he was imposing on junior high.
We were incredibly organized. We were probably more organized than a lot of collegiate programs.
It was just a system of you cannot skip any steps if you want to be successful. Almost like Coach Shaw was our father. I mean, you didn't want to let your father down.
Just as it had always been in the past, it was Shaw's personality that endeared him to his players and made his extreme demands palatable.
You wanted to play for him and match his passion and his fire and his drive.
He just had that special charisma about him that a lot of successful coaches have.
He made you want to work, but at the same time, he knew how to have fun and make it fun.
He was real approachable. I remember he was kind of a cool coach.
He loved to pick around and play and kind of goof off with us, but we knew when he was serious, it was time to be serious. It was time to work.
He called the linemen the hogs, and he called the quarterbacks and the tailbacks and the receivers the pretty boys. He talked with us about drinking. He talked with us about girls. I mean, he kind of served as a father figure too. But he was, he was real about it.
He gelled it all together in a way that you still felt like he was your, friend and coach at the same time. So it was kind of a special relationship.
Once the 1992 season kicked off, the junior high Raiders had been completely remade in Shaw's image, and the wins came fast and furious.
We won a lot of games by a large point margin.
I can remember sitting with the high school players and them watching the offense that the junior high was running and looking around going, like, this is awesome.
He would say before every game, you better get the women and children off the street, the merchants behind the counters, because Jackson Academy's coming to town and they're going to kick some butt.
Shaw's Raiders entered Week 7 with an unblemished record and gave Shaw his first opportunity to square off against rival Jackson Prep since the 1984 varsity championship game.
Jackson Prep was the big kid on the block. He called it the bully.
Coach Shaw was definitely not afraid to circle games. He was definitely one of those guys that said, this game matters more than this game.
His big thing was, I want to beat Jackson Prep because y'all are just as good as they are. You just don't know it.
Very first play, Philip Schutz takes it to the house. Long touchdown run, untouched. I think we scored on 2 of our first 3 plays of the game. We're up 21-0 against them at halftime. Now, this was a team, mind you, that the year before was up 35-0 on us at halftime. So that was pretty neat because that was the first time Jay had ever really manhandled Jackson Prep in football.
A week later, Shaw's team won the unofficial junior high state championship. In a last-second thriller against powerhouse Park Lane Academy, the win completed the dramatic resurgence of JA's junior high program as excited eyes turned towards the future.
He said, I want y'all to carry that up to high school and beat Jackson Prep and Park Lane and be state champions.
This was one I think that he thought he could see through to the end. And I always would ask him, I'd say, what would you do? Would you like to go coach in college? And he said, well, maybe at some point, but right now I just want to be at JA. And he just loved it. Everything about it.
After Shaw coached the junior high program to another successful season in 1993, it was soon announced that varsity head coach Kim Alsop would not return to Jackson Academy for the 1994 season. Alsop's departure created a long-awaited opportunity for Shaw.
He always wanted to be a head coach. He wanted to be the man. This is my show. We're going to do it this way.
Well, it was a kind of a sticky time because it was kind of like, well, should I even go talk to the people about it, or should I just stand back and see? He wanted it for sure.
Shaw never considered himself to be a shoo-in for the job, namely due to talented coaches that remained from the prior staff. However, Shaw may have been the only person that questioned who would lead the Raiders into the 1994 season.
We immediately felt Sherard was the one choice that we wanted to promote.
He knew how schools worked, and he knew what was important in the life of a school and the day-to-day activity of a school.
You could kind of tell that he would probably end up being the head coach one day at JA. You know, it's just a matter of time.
The relationship that he had with the players coming up from junior high, for an athletic director, it was a no-brainer.
I think the only person that had a real big question was Sherard. You know, in my mind and the other coaches on staff, we knew that he'd be the best one for it. So in our mind, you know, we felt like we knew what would happen.
I never felt like he expected to get it, because that just wasn't really his personality.
And it was very obvious that the kids loved him. I don't know that I've ever seen a coach that the kids love more than Sherard.
You're going to get it. Relax. Don't worry about it. You're going to get it. Relax.
The overarching theme was always, it's got to be 100 miles an hour all the time. You've got to earn it. You've got to want it.
When they finally decided that they were going to move him up and he was going to be the head coach, it was a great day. It was what he'd always dreamed of.
And once he got that job, I mean, he was home. He was there.
Excitement and expectations surrounding the Raider football program were instantly elevated upon the hiring of Shaw.
I knew he'd do a good job. There was no doubt in my mind he'd be successful.
There was a chance that we could play for the championship. It's going to be through Coach Shaw.
Words can't describe almost how thrilled we were when Shaw came in as the new coach.
He couldn't wait to get started. He didn't say, well, we're going to try to rebuild and get to a point where we're great. He said, we're going after greatness now. He was very, very proud to get the opportunity to be a head football coach for a school that he felt so greatly devoted to, and he just loved Jackson Academy.
While every coach aspires for greatness, Shaw, of course, had his own specific and well-established method of achieving it.
I remember him excitedly pulling me and several of the leaders for the team aside and saying, guys, look what I got the school to get us. And they were these very sharp uniform patterns. He was excited that we would be the best looking team on the field, and he took that part seriously. He wanted every time we stepped out on the field, we represented something greater than us.
Love for the team to look good. I mean, he thinks if you look good, you play good.
I've never met a man that cut grass twice in one day.
Every Saturday morning, he was going to mow the football field, whether it needed mowing or not.
I don't think that you would find this kind of field or course at like a PGA event. It was the most beautiful field, and it just represented what Coach Shaw, he took seriously everything that he did so that everything appeared right.
Not only did Shaw want his team and field to look good, but he also wanted a legitimate school spirit to run throughout the student body. For Shaw, such spirit was best measured by the quality of pep rallies each week. And when one of the very first rallies was not meeting his expectations, he did not hesitate to intervene.
He just didn't feel like the school was responding, the student body was responding the way they should to the efforts of the team, his team.
After a couple of speakers got up, Sherard walked up to the microphone and said, we're going to the dressing room.
And he said, my boys have been sweating and bleeding for this school to win, and if this is the type response they're going to get, then we're done. And he walked off, and he took us with him.
Guys, let's go. And they just got up and followed him. And I was kind of embarrassed. I was kind of like, I don't know, what just happened?
I will tell you, nothing solidified a commitment to following that man than seeing him say, if you're not going to support my guys, then I'm going to get them out of here.
And let me tell you, it changed after that. The attitude and the support from the students changed after that.
And man, I'm telling you, that next pep rally, it was something else. He would go places and bring things back and tell them, well, they did this. And the cheerleaders were always going to him, asking could they do certain things after that.
He would meet with the cheerleaders like beforehand. I mean, what coach does that? And come up with some, like you said, some theatrical, skit that they were going to do.
We never knew what to expect out of him at pep rallies anyway. He was pretty active at pep rallies, and You know, he liked speaking in front of the crowd and the students. He liked getting the students pumped up.
Wow, this guy's awesome. He canceled a pep rally because he wasn't happy with enthusiasm and just the whole school buying in to, we're going to win, we're going to be successful.
By the time Shaw became the head coach, the old agreement that prevented Jackson Academy and Jackson Prep from playing one another in the regular season had long since fallen to the wayside. In fact, the schools had met routinely following the initial showdown in the 1984 championship, and Prep had maintained an unblemished 9-0 record in the series. Just as he always had, Shaw relished the opportunity to play Prep and to build them up as a bigger-than-life opponent on which to focus his players' attention.
I've never seen anything like it. He was obsessed with Prep.
Oh, he hated Prep. He hated Prep.
He never ceased to remind us that Jackson Prep was the best, and that was what we were going to, if we were going to be the king of the hill, we had to knock them off the mountain.
He talked about them all year. A lot of his motivational handouts and things would mention Prep throughout the year. He was totally obsessed with Prep.
The girls and I would say, now, we're not bother Daddy this week. We're going to be playing Prep this week, and we won't bother him.
To prepare his team for the 1994 game with Prep, Shaw opted to create an environment reminiscent of Sammy Dantone's infamous 1984 trip to Holmes County State Park.
I remember that weekend before the game, traveling to Byram and pull out in the pasture, and I said, well, what are we doing, Sherard? And he's, well, this is where we're going to practice. I said, this pasture right here. He said, yep, we got to get it cut, see if we can get it lined off, and so this is where we're going to practice, you know.
There were cow patties and ant beds.
And he was scared to death of spies. You know, and there were a lot of Prep people living around the practice facilities on the East Campus where we practiced at that time.
And so he quarantined us. No one knew we were going. We'd come back. Our parents would be like, where were you? We can't tell you, you know.
He said, this is where men will be made. This is where we'll establish who we are as an identity as a team, and we're going to go play the very best game we can.
To cap off the unusual week of preparation, Shaw dressed and warmed up the team on the Jackson Academy campus before busing across town to arrive just in time for the opening kickoff.
And he makes a big spectacle of locking the gate. He gets a chain padlock and locks the gate. And he says, all right, nobody's going in, nobody's coming out. I'm going to take 11 able-bodied guys that believe they can win to Flowwood. And we were full pad, full contact practice, 30 minutes for the Prep game. When we finished, people were bruised, they were bleeding, they were sweating like crazy. We never went to the locker room. Just went straight on the field.
Anything that might be able to get a mental advantage or get the players excited about, he's going to try. I have no doubt about it. That didn't surprise me at all.
And I was looking forward to the next year to see what he came up with, because it would have been something different, you know.
Yeah, we may have thought it was a little nuts at the time, but it made sense later on, kind of realized why he did the stuff he did. I will say this, you can never question Shaw's dedication to the football program or JA.
Despite Shaw's best efforts, the Raiders lost to a talented Prep team 24-14, thus running JA's all-time record against its crosstown rival to 0-10.
You know, he would do things like when the game was over, win or lose, he would send me roses. Thank you for, letting me have a week that I could just only concentrate on football.
Sherard would say he doesn't lose. Sherard goes either to win, and if he doesn't win, he learns. So that the next time around, he has a greater possibility of winning. Sherard always would build his decisions based around a positive step and not a negative thought. If you did not win, he tried to figure out why and learn a way that the next time you could play better and reach that goal that you were trying to accomplish.
Overall, the 1994 team finished a respectable 7-4, including a tightly contested loss in the first round of the playoffs to eventual state champion Park Lane Academy. The gritty performance in that game, coupled with a returning senior class that had formed the backbone of Shaw's undefeated junior high team, had everyone hoping 1995 would finally be the year of the Raider. While 1994 brought Shaw the exhilarating high of becoming the head football coach at Jackson Academy, Life balanced that joy by also dealing him a devastating blow. On February 16th of that year, his oldest daughter, Meredith, tragically took her own life, only 12 days shy of her 16th birthday. The event would change Sherard Shaw Jr. forever.
He just adored his children. He loved all four of them with just so much passion. And her illness just broke his heart and made him sad.
So the loss of Meredith was something that none of us really even remotely thought could happen.
And when Sherard lost Meredith, Sherard changed. Sherard changed. Sherard's confidence level up to that point was one that you and I will never feel that confidence level. That degree of, and it's not cockiness, it's just that degree of sincerity on what I am doing with these kids that I coach and teach. But when he lost Meredith, he changed. He started questioning, what could I have done differently?
Even though he was going about the steps of living everyday life, it was always on his mind and what he could have done different.
And he just cried. God, what should I have done? Could I have been a better father? How could I have prevented this?
And he just always felt that it was his fault, his fault, his fault. And you can tell someone that it's not your fault as many times as you would like. But you're going to have to sometime get to a point where you can realize that from within. No one can convince you of that. But Sherard changed drastically when he lost his little girl.
In addition to dealing with the emotional pain associated with Meredith's death, Shaw was also dealing with a lingering physical nuisance throughout 1994. By the end of the year, that nuisance revealed itself to be something far more serious.
And I was over there eating one night, and Sherard was eating, and he just got up from the table, goes outside. I'm not paying any attention, but then I said, what is he doing?
Occasionally I have trouble digesting my food, and I'll just wait for a second, and then eventually it'll just go ahead and settle. I think I've got this hiatal hernia. Once football season's over, I'll go in and get it checked.
This is, getting a little bit out of hand. So we ended up, that's when he went to the doctor. They told him that day, they said, this doesn't look good. So, of course, we had to wait all weekend. We have to wait a week. But I was thinking, God, okay, you got this, you got this. They biopsied it, and I'll never forget the phone call. It was like, it is cancer. And he said it's esophageal cancer.
But he was very open with us about his illness and treatment too. Hey guys, I'm going under surgery. I'll see y'all in a couple weeks. This sucks. I can't eat. I'm eating out. I'm drinking out of a straw. You guys are getting to eat Wendy's.
Huge operation, and they took out a lot of the stomach and most of the esophagus. Well, that caused him not to be able to eat very much.
Tina and the other family members carefully nursed Shaw around the clock for the next several months. And by the end of the school year, he received good news from the doctors.
We don't see any cancer. Scans are showing up good. Everything looks good. We even went on vacation. We took the girls to Gulf Shores, and he ate some seafood, and he was eating again. And, he wasn't hooked up to anything.
Sadly, the hope was short-lived, and more bad news arrived just days before the start of the highly anticipated 1995 season.
Late July, and he was supposed to be well, supposed to be cured, supposed to be doing better. And he was out taking care of the fields and all, and he was just kind of pale looking. I said, Sherard, are you feeling all right? What's going on? I said, no, I'm not feeling good. I'm gonna go back to the doctor.
I remember Tina and my dad calling me and telling me the cancer had come back and he was gonna go through radiation. I just remember their voice being different.
Yeah, it hit you hard. It really did. It was something you didn't want. You hear other people get, but not one of your friends.
And I remember talking to Gene Barrett. He told us, he said, if y'all make playoffs, he won't be around. I didn't believe him. I thought Sherad's going to be around.
I guess at the time, hard to hear, but not devastating, because here's a man that you believe could move mountains. If he said he could do it, he could, and he told us, I'm going to beat this. And so we felt like he would beat it, because as well as we could beat any opponent on the field, he could beat any diagnosis he might get. And as a 16, 17-year-old kid, you wanted to believe the toughest man you knew would be able to beat anything.
The seriousness of Shaw's diagnosis raised numerous questions about the highly anticipated 1995 season.
Probably among the parents and faculty, I think there was some talk of, hey, we may have to find an interim head coach and whatnot. But he was, between us and him, he never once hinted at the fact that he may not be our coach that year. He was always the captain. He never once faltered on that. So we never thought that he wasn't going to be there, and I think that probably helped him too. With his battle with cancer, was just trying to hold on to normalcy, and part of that being, I'm a head football coach, I got these young men under me I got to take care of.
I don't think Sherard ever entertained the idea of quitting. He was determined to beat cancer. He lived every day to the fullest. He didn't seek or want any sympathy.
He still was strong, but, you could tell.
Though Shaw was the head coach in both name and spirit, the daily heavy lifting was quickly, though unofficially, transferred to assistants Blunt, Luke, and McLean.
I remember Sherard would come to practice from time to time after chemo or something. He'd bring his lawn chair.
I think the main thing is I didn't want to let him down. In the back of your mind, this might be Sherard's last year. You want to see him go out on top. You want him to see him reap the reward, so to speak, of what he's put into this program.
J.A. opened the season at a blistering pace, outscoring its opponents 116-0 in the first 5 games. Shaw was present for each event, but it took a heavy physical toll.
And we were definitely on a roll, and a lot of confidence built in that first month. I think everybody was seeing the plan coming together. Everybody's really buying in.
But he was just so exhausted from being out there with the boys that when we went home, he asked us to lay down the seats so that he could lay down on the way home, because he was in pain and he was not feeling well.
Even though he was losing that battle, I just remember them winning, and I remember those boys and how much they loved him, and they were our boys.
J.A. took its unblemished record into game number 6 against undefeated Jackson Prep. Though Shaw was not present during the week to implement one of his signature motivational ploys, he did surprise everyone when he showed up to deliver the pregame speech.
And Coach Shaw walks in, said, I'd like to talk to the team. So, I said, that's fine, that's great. They'd love to hear you.
That's when reality kind of set in a little bit.
He looked so weak. His voice was so weak. And you could just see the kids' hearts breaking.
And he was just, withering, he was just losing weight and stuff. So it was obvious he was not doing well.
It was tough because, he was telling these guys, this is the last time I'm going to be here for a Jackson Prep game.
Was the first time that I specifically remember him showing emotion about his illness.
You could tell he wanted to see us beat Prep before he said goodbye. He wanted to see J.A. be victorious on that field versus Jackson Prep.
As the team exited the locker room, and before Shaw made his way to the press box, a player accidentally slammed into the fragile coach.
Sherard goes down to his knees. Wow, he's just like, whoa. I grab him, get him up. Everybody's getting out of the locker room going, the coach is going. And I get him, and we're the last ones, and I said, are you okay?
You knew that he had no business being at a football game. He's fighting for his life, and that's where he decided he wanted to be.
I didn't think we was going to make it. He was hurt. Got through the game, going through the game, I looked over at him. There was a number of times he just had his head down.
But he was so heavily medicated during that time that he would call plays from the D'Antoni era. He'd say, Tom, why don't you run this play? And I'd look at David and say, I don't know what that is, David.
He was doing the best he could to be out there, and who knows how he even did at that point.
We're playing Jackson Prep. We've never beaten them before. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm fixing to lose a pretty good friend.
Well, it's not the state championship, but I mean, those games were bigger than the state championship in our minds.
The moment was too big for us that night. The regular season Jackson Prep game, the moment was too big for our team.
And instead of preparing and playing like we had all along, we were trying to win for a different reason. And I remember thinking how sad we were before the game was not normal, and then how sad we felt after the game, like we'd let him down.
The Raiders rebounded from the difficult loss and quickly resumed their winning ways. Memorable to everyone on the team was an emotional final home game against Hillcrest Christian, where Shaw watched his team from the end zone through a second-story window in the administration building.
They had a light on in the library, but not where Coach Shaw was sitting, so all you could see was his silhouette sitting in a wheelchair.
He was giving it his all to be there for his team, and his team knew it.
Every time something good would happen, we would point up at Coach Shaw, and you would see him raise his fist in the air. But just the silhouette of the man that we knew as the tough guy on the sideline yelling at us, grabbing us, telling us we could win.
You just knew that they were there for each other. There wasn't anything left unsaid or undone.
2 weeks later, the Raiders played their final game of the regular season against the undefeated, two-time defending state champion Park Lane Pioneers. Shaw certainly placed Prep number 1 on his most wanted list, but Park Lane was considered 1B, and they were currently fielding some of the most dominant teams in school history.
You know, the kids weren't focused. They had obviously other things on their mind.
That was equally intimidating because they had just incredible athletes at Park Lane.
We're talking to them before the game, going over things we're going to do, and it's just they weren't listening. They weren't engaged at all.
I remember specifically just getting my butt handed to me that whole game. I mean, I had a terrible game. It kind of felt like it may be over when we lost. In the back of your mind, you're saying we didn't beat Prep. You know, what has happened with the season?
Before arriving back in Jackson, the team found out that a quirk in the league structure would not only put them in the playoffs the following Friday night, but would send them right back to Macomb to again square off against Park Lane. Several players visited Shaw at his home the next day, where the coach clearly communicated his expectations and final set of instructions.
Remember, we knocked on the door and Tina came and she had been crying and she said, absolutely, he wants to see y'all go back. And I remember him laying in his bed, kind of under his covers, very, very different appearance than what he had looked even months before with all the weight loss. And I remember him motivating us. It was not the type speeches that we got when he was 160 pounds and fiery, but he said, you can do this, guys. I've prepared you. Now it's your time to go out and grab your destiny. But in tears, I'll never forget, he said, guys, I want you to go out and win a ring for my little girls. He said, I'm not going to be there, but I want you to win that ring that we've talked about for 3 years now, and I want you to give it to my little girls. And I remember leaving his house that day, crying in my car, thinking, we have to win. There's no other opportunity. There's no other ending of this story except doing what Coach has asked us to do.
He never said anything about, I'm not going to beat this after all. Never.
He was a very faithful Christian.
Our conversations changed. We would be discussing favorite scriptures in the Bible. So you knew that thought was in his mind, and he was preparing himself. But he never said, I'm not going to beat it.
And he said 2 good things came out of his sickness. Number 1, he'd become closer to the Lord. And number 2, he was going to see Meredith.
It's early in the morning. Dad knocks on the door. I mean, I remember it like I'm yesterday. I'm taking a shower. My dad knocks on the door, and he says, son, I said, Coach Shaw passed, didn't he, Dad? He said, yeah.
Sherard Rudolph Shaw Jr. passed away in his sleep at approximately 5 a.m. on Tuesday, November 7th, 1995. His funeral was held 2 days later at Colonial Heights Baptist Church.
I remember walking up that day and seeing all the football players, and it just took my breath away.
I remember everything about them and how comforting that was.
The football team was back behind where the ceremony was going on, sitting sort of where the choir sits. So even in the midst of his funeral, it felt like it was It was kind of about the team. Like he still wanted the team to be involved.
We had lost their father, they had lost their best friend, they had lost their son, and they were, more worried about us. They're amazing family, man.
Some people were crying, some people were stone-faced, but everybody was moved immensely by that funeral.
You're in a haze at that point. Not many of us had experienced anybody passing away that we were close to at that age. So definitely kind of shock, I think, is what the way a teenager deals with that.
Then seeing his casket be carried by the football team, it was just a very powerful and difficult thing to watch.
The strength of the Shaw family that you saw was strictly our faith in God. I mean, there comes a point in time, especially when you lose a child and a brother and a husband and a father, that you don't have any strength. It's gone, and you have to become totally dependent on your faith. We're able to survive something like that because we feel like that we will see Sherard again.
The day after Shaw was laid to rest, the Jackson Academy football team would load a bus and make the familiar 80-mile trek down Highway 55 to Macomb, Mississippi, to once again take on the Park Lane Pioneers. Recognizing that teenage emotions were at critical levels, Sherard Shaw Sr. and brother Eric addressed the team.
So we started trying to determine, okay, how is this going to affect the lives of the players on that football team? Suddenly, whether you were winning or learning was not the issue. What the issue was, what kind of effect is this going to have on the kids? And what kind of effect is it going to have on them if they go and play this game and they don't win? What are they gonna think? Are they gonna think that they let somebody down? It wasn't important for the kids to win that game. What was important was that when they finished that game, regardless, that they felt a sense of satisfaction for what had just occurred. And when you look up at that scoreboard and you don't have as many points as the other team, you can still walk off that field and eventually say, they were just a better team, but I gave it everything I had. And just don't have any regrets.
Everything Coach ever said hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is he's free from his illness now.
It was kind of that point where the seniors really did step up. And we kind of took control of the team.
We have every opportunity to go down and beat a team that had won 22 straight ball games. It could be no other way. I mean, I remember thinking of Coach Shaw's little girls. I remember thinking of Tina.
You don't want to play? Get the hell off the field.
And he was going to be watching us. It wasn't going to be in the library. It was going to be from a different vantage point, but he was still going to be there pulling for us to win. Personally, I remember thinking there's no way we'll lose.
Not only did it not seem that important to me, but winning the game just didn't, I didn't see a likelihood of it happening.
I remember pulling up in the bus and there was like this haze over the field, like a fog. It was weird. It was like this real calm feeling, like we're just gonna go do our best and whatever happens, happens.
It was pouring down rain and it was thunder and lightning and it was such a mess. We all had on rain boots and raincoats and took our umbrellas.
Sitting in the stands before the game started and the weather cleared up and it was a great night to play a football game, you thought, wow, what is going on? You know, it was storming on the way down.
The Park Lane game, it was incredible. It was incredible. I mean, it was nothing more than two teams saying, you are not going to cross that goal. You're not going to do it.
Yeah, it was a brutal game. Every play, somebody be yelling, uncontrollably, like hitting each other, and it just seemed like we kept trading punches.
Who could try to get down the red zone? Who could stop you? Who could make plays? And nobody was making them.
During the game, Heather was 4 at the time, and she climbs up in the stands and she said, Mama, I saw Daddy. And I said, where did you see Daddy? And she said, he was sitting up on that goalpost over there. And I said, he was? He said, he was watching his players.
Back and forth. I mean, this is a heavyweight fight. then the play happens.
Tied at 0-0 with only 2 minutes remaining in the game, a routine pitch to running back Jeffrey Lohmeyer morphed into the most memorable play in Jackson Academy football history.
And I just remember in the huddle, Lohmeyer had this kind of look about him. He pointed up to Coach Shaw and said, "This is the one." There was something in his mind that was special that happened before that play.
So I remember diving up the left side, bouncing off the back of my left guard.
He landed on top of the pile on his back.
I think Lohmeyer at that moment in that time was the only one that realized, hey, my knees haven't touched.
And I just saw him roll off.
Then you kind of hear the crowd roar and look up, and then you think, well, there he goes.
What's happening? Why is he still running?
I'm like, I thought the play was over.
This is what we've always dreamed of, and it's fixing to come true.
40, breaks the tackle, Lohmeyer! 40, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Jeffrey Lohmeyer! 64 yards, the Raiders are on the scoreboard!
Did that just happen? Is that even possible?
They were just in shock, They were like, wait, he was down. And he wasn't.
It kind of was a miracle play. 10 seconds of your life that you won't forget.
That really just defeated Park Lane right then and there. They knew there was no way in 2 minutes they could come back and win.
Because our defense was just lights out. Just complete. They were possessed. I knew that they weren't going to score on us.
The Raiders have but to snap the ball once, and this game will be over. And somewhere up in heaven, Coach Sherard Shaw has a big smile on his face.
It's probably one of the hardest fought games we've ever had, and we pulled it off spectacularly.
I remember being interviewed and started raining a little bit, and I said, those are tears from heaven. Heaven's rocking tonight.
At that point, my feeling is that we've won this game, and it's not the last game that we're going to win.
And the crowd chants, "We want Prep. Bring on those Patriots."
And they were all around Tina, and she was around them. And it was just, that's when the magic really revved up.
JA advanced to the second round of the playoffs with emotions peaking at astronomical levels. And yet there was one opponent that could ratchet those emotions even higher.
The next week, it started a whole new era, though, because who was next? Prep. Prep was next. Oh, let's see, when was the last time we beat Prep? Oh, that's right. It hasn't happened.
No matter what we did, we couldn't beat Prep, and they knew it. They had our number.
We're the senior class that needs to do this. We need to beat Prep. We need to leave that mark on them.
We weren't going to lose. I don't say it out of disrespect to Prep at all, because they beat us every time we'd ever played.
Even though we had never beaten Park Lane and we had never beaten Prep, for whatever reason, when we lined up against them in those playoffs games, it always felt like we're going to win. It doesn't matter what the past scorecard's been.
And we wanted to please Shaw. We wanted to show that in that time, that regardless of what's been going on, what was happening in our lives, we were going to prevail.
Our kids were ready to play. I'd never seen them so ready to play. Of all the years I've been there, they were ready to play. They were focused. They're asking very relevant questions. Coach, what are we doing in this situation?
We were possessed that night. We were going to run the ball and run the ball and run the ball, and they were going to have a hard time stopping it.
With the loss of Coach Shaw and the promise to his daughters and his wife, I'd never, losing just it wasn't an option.
It was kind of our way of showing him how much he meant to us. That we wanted his legacy to live on after that.
I was just shocked that they won the Park Lane game. Just completely shocked. But I still, I wanted to believe, but I just wasn't quite there yet. But I'll say this, the first play against Prep, I was a believer. I just thought, okay, this is going to happen.
Prep in a 5-2 defensive alignment. Here's Lohmeyer, got a first down and more. Lohmeyer around the corner, racing down the sidelines is Lohmeyer. Hands it again to Lohmeyer, left tackle, untouched, touchdown Raiders. And the crowd still loose. Raiders, I think, have got it. Jackson Academy has recovered at the 17, and Jackson Proud trying to get outside, breaks a tackle. Lohmeyer to the 15, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown. Straight up the middle once again. Allen to the 25-30, 35-40. Allen with a foot race to midfield. First and goal. Here is Lohmeyer near the goal line. Touchdown, Jeffrey Lohmeyer. his third of the night. To stop Park Lane last week. Here's Harris throwing over the middle. Pass intercepted. It's intercepted. Brad Reeves picks it off for the Raiders.
When the final horn sounded, the Prep Dragon lay slain at the feet of Shaw's Raiders, forever changing the complexion of the rivalry and advancing Jackson Academy to the state title game for the first time since 1984.
Jackson Academy wins. Jackson Academy wins. The monkey is off the back forever. 21-7. The Raiders will be in the state championship a week from tonight, Andy.
I remember walking across and I said, man, I'd just like to see what Sherard would be doing right now, because I knew how important it was to him. It was fun to watch, and it was crazy. It was actually kind of nice to see how Prep reacted. They showed a lot of class.
Prep is a class school, and I can remember after the game that the Prep fan base was very supportive of us as well and showed their appreciation. We won't forget that either.
It was like our family had won. It was the JA family had won. We've completed this challenge.
I personally felt like we won the state championship when we beat Prep, and I remember thinking we had one more week to prepare against a team that we never talked about.
Look, this was awesome. This was great for Jackson Academy. This was great for Raider Nation, but we got one more. And if we don't win the next one, nobody's going to remember this one.
Carroll Academy from Carrollton, Mississippi was certainly a formidable opponent for an emotionally depleted Jackson Academy squad. But the outcome of this championship game had already been decided by fate. And after a sloppy 60-minute slugfest, Shaw's Raiders completed the storybook ending with a 14-7 victory that earned JA its first football championship.
Everybody who played left it out there for him, and proved that he indeed was the coach to leave behind that legacy and start a tradition.
I know that we felt a great emotional relief that they had realized their goal and that we were able to be a part of something that they achieved.
And I remember I squeezed Grandpa Shaw hard enough that he told me ease up.
You felt a part of it. You feel like you had something to do with it. And I didn't know any players, but I was just excited for the team.
Coach Shaw's story was, I remember writing it, but I remember writing the whole story after it happened. It's one of those columns where you, when you hit the last key, you got a tear coming down, It was just an unbelievably inspiring story. A group of high school kids enduring this incredible loss and then somehow becoming better for it.
I was awfully proud for them, I can tell you that. Because a lot of work had gone into that, a lot of work. I was proud of one of my guys helped lead the way.
That's what he wanted. He would have had it no other way. He wanted us to be state champs. We deserved it.
The job that Coach Blunt, Coach Lute, and Coach McLean did to get that team prepared for that run, I don't know that they've ever gotten the credit they really deserve for that, really for that whole season.
It was months later, we had a special pep rally for the football team where we actually gave that ring to his little girl, and I remember I carried that ring over and gave it to Tina and his daughters, and I'm not one to cry much. I remember it flowed that day because I could see the man in the bed that said win one for my daughter, and to physically hand that ring to the family, it was like, all right, Coach, we did what you asked.
Coach Shaw's life and his 1995 championship team impacted Jackson Academy High School in both tangible and intangible ways. Some of the results were apparent the moment after the championship game ended, while others only became visible when viewed through a decades-long lens of hindsight.
I made the statement several times that if JA ever beats Jackson Prep, then they're over the hump. The playing field is now level. It was game on at that point. And Sherard had a lot to do with that.
But it really jumped at JA at that time. I think the next year we probably dressed out 80 kids or something, where we'd been dressing out maybe 60. It was A lot of it's just believing in yourself. You know, once you win that first one, it just makes you believe that anything's possible.
The very next year, Blunt's team proved anything was indeed possible when they once again reached the championship game and toppled an undefeated and heavily favored Jackson Prep squad. The championships captured by Shaw and Blunt instantly elevated the collective self-confidence at the school. But there was another philosophical change implemented by Shaw that would prove to pay even higher dividends over the coming decades. Shaw recognized that Jackson Academy's mindset of being Jackson Prep's little brother would only change through head-to-head victories on the field and by severing the pipeline of its students leaving for Jackson Prep after the 6th grade.
You had to go in and have a great retention program, because in the 6th grade, they could leave, you know. And so you had to go down there and really build relationships with those 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And Sherard is the one who really started that. He initiated that.
His job was getting to the elementary schools and help convince those guys to stay at JA.
Come in the lunchroom with the young boys and sit and have lunch with them, go into things that they were doing, making sure he was always at their games.
I remember going on some trips with him. You know, sometimes we'd take some fathers out and help sell them on our program.
It wasn't hard for him. He'd just go make friends with them, and then he'd say, oh, by the way, can your son come play football for me?
At the turn of the millennium, Shaw's daughters, Heather and Blair, were maturing into high school students themselves. While many new faces were a part of the JA administration and coaching staff, the seeds of excellence planted by their father were coming into full bloom.
There was still a lot of people that worked with Dad when he was at JA, and so when I went, walked through the halls, people would speak to me to where they'd be like, how do you know him so well? I'm like, well, my dad.
It was clear to me that something special had happened in 1995, 5 years before I started at Jackson Academy. The stories of Coach Shaw and the 1995 football team were echoing and reverberating around the halls and grounds of Jackson Academy.
So we were able to win 4 championships, I think, out of my first 5 years there. And so it was a blessing, and we just kept building off that.
My sophomore, my junior, and my senior year, we won overall. And we were so good, and it wasn't really a question whether we were going to win. We were going to win.
But 95, under the direction of what Sherard started there, was what catapulted us and was really a springboard into the success we've been able to have for the last, 20 years.
And I remember thinking, this is what he built, and this is him, and this is his legacy. And it was so special because I loved it, probably not as much as he did. I don't know that anybody could, but I just remember being so proud to be his daughter.
In 2009, David Sykes became Jackson Academy's 7th head varsity football coach. During his tenure, the Raiders would notch several victories against rival Jackson Prep and would capture 3 additional championships. When Larry Weems became the 8th head coach in 2016, championships were no longer aspirations, but rather job requirements.
After the 95 team, each of our football coaches has won a state championship since that time. The pressure's on Coach Weems to win a state championship, and we certainly believe he will do that.
Sherard Shaw was the 4th football coach at JA. I firmly believe that had Sherard not experienced the cancer that ultimately took his life, that JA would only have 4 football coaches. Sherard Shaw would still be there. No telling what his record would be. He would be anywhere from 250 to 300 career wins. The ones of us that have been very fortunate to coach after Sherard, we probably would be doing something else right now, because Sherard would still be he'd be the guy running the Raiders, running the show for the Raiders on Friday nights.
It's Sherard's greatest legacy, is that positive approach of complete dedication to being a Raider.
This story is important on so many levels. For the current JA community and for our young Raiders. It's something that was a turning point in the history and the life of our school.
If he came back afterwards and saw where it had progressed to, he would not be able to believe. It'd blow his mind. That's exactly what he envisioned, though. He envisioned it to reach a point of greatness. And it has. It has.
My full name is Walker Sherard Shaw. I'm named after my great-grandmother,
and my grandfather, Sherard Shaw. I know he coached the 95 J.A. Raider team. He passed away of cancer. They ended up winning the championship that year. I think it's a pretty cool story.
I'm really disappointed that that Walker doesn't get a chance to meet him, because I know that he would, I know that he would love him the same way I did. But at the same time, like, all of the things that I was taught, whether it's just the importance of doing your very best at everything and just full speed all the time. And if we're going to make mistakes, let's just make them at 100 miles an hour. And taking pride in just everything you do, whether it's your schoolwork, being a good son, certainly when you're competing in athletics. Like, we're not going to halfway do anything.
In a testament to his father's desire to think big, Bubba, along with his wife Jennifer, often pondered ways to preserve the story of the 1995 Raider team and simultaneously leverage it in a way that would have a positive impact on others.
We know we want it to be something that's cancer research related, and I thought, he spent his life around kids, working with kids, coaching kids, trying to mold them into better people. So if we're going to do this, maybe something within pediatric cancer would make the most sense.
Through the efforts of Bubba and Jennifer, as well as the former members of Shaw's 1995 team, the Sherard Shaw Foundation for Pediatric Cancer Research was formally established in 2015. The organization's first event took place the following year at the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame and raised $20,000 that was promptly donated to the Blair E. Batson Children's Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi. The creation of this documentary movie is a continuation of the Foundation's efforts to raise money for pediatric cancer research. The impact of Sherard Shaw's life in this world can be seen in tangible objects like the bronze Raider statue in the Jackson Academy Football Stadium, or through the works and accomplishments of the charitable foundation created in his name. But the best demonstration of his impact and influence on this world can be observed by examining the quality of men his former players have matured into and their continued love and admiration of their former coach.
I think everybody kind of gets that coach once in their life that they go, this is the guy. And for us, it was Shaw.
Coach Shaw got the most out of his players by not caring about you as a player, but caring about you as a person. And his idea was to make us as successful as we could as individuals, and we would be very successful on the athletic field if we were first successful as individuals.
He was a leader of young men. I think he would be really proud of the men that most of us have become. A lot of what he, taught me, I would like to relay to my child as well. I mean, he was an amazing man. He was.
This was his calling in life, was coaching, motivating, and leading young people. That's just the man that he was, and what an unbelievable man he was.
I'm an interventional cardiologist now. I still think things Coach Shaw taught me prepared me to be the kind of person I am today. I'm a father of 3. I couldn't have known those things when I was 17 years old, but I always carry Coach Shaw with me.
I'm glad that he was involved in my life. I'm glad that I got to play with him and, more importantly, learn about life from those guys. Coach Shaw was an amazing man, and I think it's obvious with the foundation and what you guys have done that he's obviously touched a lot of lives. And I think that's probably as cool of a legacy to carry on as all the people from your age and mine and everybody else that he's affected. I think that's the neatest thing.